Welcome to Countdown to Game Day, covered by State Farm. Alongside Dalen Cuff, Harry Lyles Jr., I am Sam Ravech. We got you for the next 30 minutes talking to you about what has been and what will be a great slate of games here this Saturday. 4 top 25 matchups. College basketball continues to deliver week to week, so why should this week be any different? Guys, the monster that is the SEC continues to also eat up more victims. It got Alabama and it got Florida on their home floors this past week. But as conference play continues to kind of go along this season, the war of attrition, injuries, which we'll talk about, it feels like 3 teams, maybe 4, have elevated themselves above the pack. You're talking about Auburn, you're talking about Duke, you're talking about Iowa State. Who is the best team in the country right now? I asked Dalen this last week, so I'll start with you, Lyles.
I've been taking a liking to Iowa State. I mean, usually their thing has been they can defend, but the scoring isn't quite there. The scoring has been there for them this year. So, and I think that obviously we've seen them have some big wins, obviously most recently against Kansas. So I've really taken a liking to what they're doing because they've always been a consistently good program, but you haven't really seen the great. We're seeing the great out of them this year.
You said Auburn last week. You sticking with them right now?
Yeah, I am. Okay. That's tough because Iowa State's right there, but they're dealing with Milan Momcilovic has a little injury. We'll talk about that. And, they're still capable of winning a national championship until somebody dethrones Auburn, even without Chani Broome, because they're one of the most impactful performances last week was their domination of Mississippi State without Broome. They have a depth of talent. Chaney Johnson was outstanding. I'm excited to see them go on the road and take on a good Georgia team who's coming off a tough loss in Tennessee.
I'll come right back to you because as we talk about the war of attrition and injuries, Chani Broome, probably the biggest one in the sport, best player on the best team, had that injury against South Carolina last week on Saturday. The MRI revealed that he would not need surgery, but he's going to miss a couple of weeks at least. And we did get our first glimpse at a Broome-less Auburn, and it looked like they didn't miss a beat.
No, because defensively they're still a really, really good team, and they have that depth of talent. They've got great guard play. They've got a bunch of veterans outside of Todd Pettiford. They're all seniors essentially. So they did what I expected them to win that game. Didn't expect them to cover.
That's a
3
good
times
team.
over the cover. It was like 6.5 point line. They beat Mississippi State by 20 in a game that was never competitive. So they kind of sent a message that we are well beyond just Chani Broome.
Yeah, I think that's really important. To me, the injury that stands out is Wade Taylor.
Huge.
Especially the way that A&M has sort of handled this one. Like when we talk about these teams that have injuries, because Duke has Malik Browns, that seems like one that can linger given the nature of it, and that might be an issue. But like he's not their volume producer. Like he's one of their better rebounders. But with Wade Taylor, like in terms of scoring and assists, like he's their guy. And so when you're one of those teams that is perhaps in the second tier maybe, or even third tier if you want to place them there, I think that injury looms large, especially given all of the questions that we have about that because they've been so secretive with it.
Exactly. We don't know when he's coming back. And for a team to hit their peak, he has to be on the floor and at 100% for them to hit their peak. Broome can slowly get worked back in, and nothing's going to change. Auburn's going to be a 1 seed. When we come to March, no matter what, basically, in my mind. So this is different for A&M.
How about Momcilovic's injury? Because that kind of news broke, and we just kind of saw it on that broadcast. Yeah, that rap against Kansas, and Iowa State just out-physicaled Kansas. But I don't think we really expected. How big of an impact will his injury have on Iowa State going down the Big 12?
It's not the same as Broome, because Broome, I think, is he's right now the National Player of the Year. If he doesn't get hurt, I still think he's the favorite over Cooper Flagg. But with Momcilovic, you lose some shooting, you lose some versatility at that 4 spot. But they can still. Curtis Jones came off the bench and started one of the rare starts for him. He was outstanding. They have some depth as well, but you want and need that guy, I think, to hit their full peak. Yes, hopefully it's back to full health in about a month or so. But what they did to Kansas, meant to mention the physical part, like to not get a defensive rebound that Hunter Dickinson gave up, and then they got buried at 3. That was the game.
Right.
There are inflection points in games, and for a veteran team like Kansas to have that on the road, you can't have that happen. Hilton Coliseum, another victim.
By this point of the season, I'm sure all of you watching on YouTube have heard about how great the SEC is, and they are great. But there is another conference, too, the Big Ten, that our friend Joe Lenardi has 7 teams projected into the field, which is second right now, right behind the SEC. After Michigan's loss to lowly Minnesota on Thursday night, Sparty and Michigan State sit alone atop the Big Ten standings, which I know makes our producer Shelby very happy. Just how good is this Michigan State team, Dalen?
Not that good.
You're not buying.
I'm not all in.
Sorry, Shelby.
I think they're fine. I hear Shelby in my ear right now. I didn't appreciate that. Here's the thing. I don't think they can win a championship. And Michigan State and Tom Izzo, what they've built their program on, despite it's been 25 years since they won the last Big Ten title, that's what we still expect is Final Fours, national championships. I don't think this team doesn't shoot the ball well enough from 3. They don't have enough playmakers to really carry them through a non-Big Ten season. The Big Ten has a bunch of quality teams. I don't think they have a title contender. I think Illinois is the class of the group when Kasper Yakashonis is fully healthy. One of the best guards, not just freshman guards, best guards in the country. He came back this week. I really like Illinois' team now and for long-term projections. I think Michigan State's going to be good, but in the end, that's not a team that's going to be cut down.
You buying or selling Michigan State?
I'm also, and I think Dalen made an important distinction here. I'm selling them because of their standard.
Yeah.
Their standard is not
Sure,
like,
okay.
oh, like, are they this pesky team? Because that's what they are. I think they're a pesky team. They do things that well-coached Tom Izzo teams do well. They defend, they crash the glass, and they've got some senior leadership on this team. So I think, could they sneak up on somebody in March and like steal a game or two? Certainly. But I don't view them as the class of the Big Ten. I look at an Illinois. Oregon has some really impressive wins so far this year. So I see those two teams perhaps as the top tier of the Big Ten. I think Michigan State is a tough out and a team that you can't really sleep on. But I don't view them as a favorite in this conference.
Michigan State, I can't wait to see those two teams because honestly, I think Michigan's long-term potential with Golden and Wolf, the 2 7-footers, and how they use them in a pick-and-roll game is. Dawson Garcia made a logo 3 to win in Minnesota.
Crazy.
That was a great shot for that young man, and congratulations to him in Minnesota that needed that win. But if I'm putting two teams long-term, in terms of winning in the tournament, I'd take the Wolverines over the Spartans.
Michigan State, 340th in the country right now in three-point field goal percentage. So imagine if they make a couple more threes, who knows?
Shelby going to lock us in.
I know.
Exactly.
Shelby's all over it.
Keep that door open!
So as good as Michigan State has been, the same cannot be said for Indiana, although they did just pick up an overtime win against Ohio State last night. Prior to that, they had lost back-to-back games by 25-plus points, and they suffered their worst loss at home in Assembly Hall to Illinois since 2010, and the fans had something to say about it. Yeah, that was pretty evident. Fire Woodson, Mike Woodson, their head coach. It just hasn't gone their way. I think they were picked 17th in the AP preseason poll, but they are 0-9 their last 9 games versus ranked opponents. What's gone wrong, Dalen, do you think, with Indiana?
Again, expectations for Indiana. They're outsized, though, given where the program is relative to their history. So people expect them to be at a certain level. They haven't been there for a long time. That said, they've not played hard enough. They've spent a ton of money in the offseason in NIL. Those dudes, they're not committed. They quit in the Illinois game. Honestly, they quit way back in Louisville. When you watch that Battle for Atlantis game, was the first kind of flag gone up and like, yo, what's up with this team right now?
Yeah.
And this was an important bounce back against Ohio State. Umar Ballo finally played the way he expected to play. They need to play inside out, be physical. That's how they're built.
Yep.
It's a little archaic, but when they have to play that way because they don't shoot it very well and they're not as tough as they need to be. Like this team is, I think it's a lot of it intangible, a lot about the collective, not just about talent.
You grew up watching this team.
Yes, and the thing that you're talking about in terms of effort and playing hard, if there is one fan base in college basketball that can read that better about their team than any other fan base, it's that Indiana fan base because, again, it's just basketball in 49 states. In Indiana, it's a different beast. So I think the chance that's something that's going to be hard to overcome. This is not a program that typically makes a change during the season, so I think that he'll be able to see this out. But this Indiana program just is not what it used to be. I liken them a lot to Nebraska football, where if you don't get the train back on the track soon, I don't know how fixable this is even long term.
No, and again, the season is still young, but it does not look good there in Bloomington as they have a tough schedule trying to turn things around for Indiana. All right, Cooper Flagg has taken the college basketball world by storm, and the freshman phenom is just getting started.
When we step on the floor, we feel we have the best player on the court.
Cooper Flagg, the gifted freshman, he's the driving force. All the way to the Cooper Flagg, throw it down, big fella.
Now let's check out a magic moment covered by State Farm. We saw Duke's Cooper Flagg set an ACC freshman record last week at home against Notre Dame. He put up 42 points in the win. Only 8 freshmen in history have ever scored more points in a single game than Flagg did. It's not a very long list. Trae Young did it a couple of times. Malik Monk, remember that 16-17 Kentucky team was filthy. Michael Beasley at K-State. Ben Simmons, of course, went on a tear. But who sends you down memory lane when you look at this list, Dalen?
Michael Beasley, for one. Well, I will say this real quick, folks. Freshmen couldn't play until 1972. So
True.
Wilt, Oscar, Kareem, they'd be on this list.
Put up some numbers.
Let's not forget about them. But Beasley was kind of before his time. That big physical guy that could score, play in the post, and he was just like a larger-than-life dude in Manhattan, Kansas. I just feel like that his performances they turned that year were pretty remarkable.
Lyle?
Yeah, and I think for me, Ben Simmons stuck out on that list.
Yeah.
I had that completely wiped from my memory. I mean, he's one of those guys that, and I think people do this with, and I think for different reasons, Steph Curry. We don't talk about his college career anymore, one of the best. And there was so much hype with Ben Simmons. He didn't have a three-pointer in this game, which, I think a lot of us are not shocked by that now.
Not surprising.
Yeah, now it's not that shocking. At the time, I was like, oh, wow, this is something different given this age and time. Did it against North Florida, but still absolutely stuffed the box score that evening. So that one, to me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, that was a really great time.
Yeah, no, that really good time. Not for LSU fans at the end of the year. They had to make the tournament.
Yeah.
They had some hope back then. That was like a December performance.
They sure did. And we think about all of those freshmen on that list. Cooper Flagg might be one of the best by the time he is done with his collegiate career. What's the most dominant freshman performance that you've ever seen, Dalen?
Well, maybe the Trae Young one steps out of my mind.
He did a couple of times.
But yeah, because the 43-point game was, I think, against Oregon back in November. I remember being in the studio for that game and being like, where'd this kid come from? Because he was like ranked like 70th or so. He was really low relative to what he was doing. And before the year, we're always talking about the big freshman.
Right.
He was on nobody's list. That was kind of his coming out party around Thanksgiving, but still with football going on, nobody's paying attention. But there was the game you're playing at your rival, Oklahoma State, on their floor. You had 48, 8 dimes, in a game that you won that was remarkable when the country was turning its attention to basketball. Like, that was the most dominating performance by a guy that's barely 6 feet tall, too. Him and Brady Manick, the pick-and-pop game they had going on was ridiculous.
We need some more of those from Trae Young with the Atlanta Hawks.
I'm sure you do.
The one that stuck out to me was Malik Monk, and just because of the stage they did it on, that CBS Sports Classic, against the North Carolina team that I think was ranked 6th at the time. And he did it on a team where he also has other NBA players on it. Like, a lot of people forget that Kentucky team had a De'Aaron Fox, a Bam Adebayo on it. So for him to be able to do that, putting up his team up with a three-pointer with 16 seconds to go in that game again on that stage, to me, that one stands out. Again, one of those great performances by a guy that our own Seth Greenberg was comparing him to Russell Westbrook after that game. That was Russell Westbrook's MVP season, so high praise, and it was well-deserved.
I told you guys this off air, though. I remember watching that game. I was calling a game somewhere. In the media room, before our game was going to tip off, we were locked on that. That performance was like mesmerizing, at your point, because it was Carolina and how it ended. Like, that's a remarkable one.
The concept of having a great freshman at Duke isn't anything new, but where do you think Cooper Flagg will rank by the end of his season amongst the great freshmen that have played in Durham, North Carolina?
Well, you just said it, by the end of the season, because if they don't cut down the nets in San Antonio, that's because the list is the list. Whether it's, obviously Grant Hill was a freshman that won a championship. Jay Will wasn't a freshman, won a championship, but he's one of those guys that people remember. Battier, you got to win a title there, and that's the hard part. Like, Zion was a comet, had presidents coming to watch him, and that's a big deal to say the least. But he still didn't win a title, and I think that's what puts you on a different pedestal. So we'll see if he gets there in that world.
So, Lyles, that's what he has to do in order to be on the Mount Rushmore of Duke players, is win a title?
That is the Duke standard, and honestly, I think it's an extra feather in his cap if he's able to do it with this Duke team, because a lot of these guys did it with Coach K. There was a standard set there. Obviously, John Shire's trying to keep that up. But if he is able to lead them to a national championship, I think that is the big differentiator, because you mentioned Zion Williamson, presidents coming to see him play, things like that. I know when I think of Duke basketball, Zion still isn't one of the first players that I think about. And I think about the guys that won titles, like a Battier, like Jay Will, and those guys. So I think if he's able to win a championship, I think that puts him in another realm with some of the all-time greats.
And just Jahlil Okafor was a freshman that led them to the last title in 2015. So that group, Quinn Cook was a senior and an important guy in that team, but he was the guy that was all-conference, all-American. So he gets lost in the Duke lore, but he did cut down the nets.
A lot of pressure on Cooper Flagg as he progresses through his Duke career. That was your Magic Moment covered by State Farm. And nobody better to talk to about the ascension of Cooper Flagg than his former AAU coach, Andy Bedard. Andy, thank you so much for hopping on with us this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. Good being here with you guys.
Of course. And I don't got to tell you, like, how big of a basketball state Maine is. So when you see the enthusiasm coming out of that state, it makes total sense. But take me back to the first time that you saw Cooper on the basketball court, and what were some of the words that popped into your mind when you first saw him doing his thing?
Well, I haven't seen him play. I didn't know what he looked like. I was meeting his mom at a game to kind of check him out, see who he was, say hello to him. And as soon as I walked into the gym, I instantly knew who he was by the way that he walked. He moved with his size, his feel, the way that he was passing the ball in the layup line. And I think he was a third or fourth grader playing against sixth graders at the time. So just the way he moved and played, and then watch him dominate the game at that level, at that age, was impressive. And it was impressive because he could have scored every time he touched it. And just his ability to get other players involved and be a great teammate and be a great leader and pick the players up that were obviously at a lesser level than him was just impressive to me. So it was pretty evident from the first moment we saw him that he was going to be special for sure.
And you mentioned some of those moments that you observed just by watching him in layup lines, but as you got to get to know him a little bit, I feel like everybody I've talked to around the program and talking to him, like, it's some of those intangibles, work ethic, team guy. When did you start to see those type of things and start to help cultivate those type of things in a young star?
Almost instantly, because, he was doing it at that fourth grade level. Then we kind of started Maine United and he brought that to the table. And, what was great, it just became contagious. So when you have your best player, obviously from a skill standpoint, doing all of those things, it makes it really easy for a coach to demand that from everybody else. So he's just his personality and the way that he plays is contagious, and you can kind of see that how Duke is progressing and the ball is moving. So he's done that on every team at every level, and it's just a really mature thing and way to play, almost like a seasoned vet that just wants to win a championship. He's kind of always played that way since I've known him, and it's certainly been a pleasure and makes it easy on a coach developing kids and trying to bring a program to the next level. And obviously he was a major part of it.
Coach, obviously by the time America gets to see a player like Cooper, they think he's just always been this good. What is an area of his game that you've seen him really improve on that you're proud of him for? And just how much of a leap did he take in whatever that thing is?
Yeah, I think his shooting for one at an earlier age, but I think that's true with a lot of young players, trying to grow and develop as they're getting stronger and getting taller. The basket, height kind of changes in their perspective. So I think he's become a really consistent shooter, as we're seeing over the past 7-8 games, and he's worked on that and put the time in. His mechanics are good. It was just a matter of time for the ball to start falling. He's really improved his ball handling. He's getting lower, getting to the basket, trying to limit his turnovers, going to the middle. So just overall continuing to develop his guard play, because I really see him with the ball a lot more just because of his ability to kind of facilitate an offense and lead his team, whether it's through passing or shooting. And, we feel he's an unbelievable passer. So it's easier when your handle's tight to kind of get in angles to make positions, and then making those passes at 6'9" certainly helps him deliver the ball to shooters on time in the pocket. So it's a special thing. And, all those things that he's worked on, it didn't just happen. He's the first one in the gym, last one to leave, as you can imagine. You've heard all the stories.
Coach, he's under a microscope at Duke. That's why part of the reason you go to Duke. Now, he's had a great season. They've had a good season. But in their 2 losses, there are questions about having freshmen lead you in late game situations and learning through some of those failures. How, if at all, do you still communicate with him? How have you maybe tried to help him kind of handle this process as he has becoming a national star?
Just keeping him positive and upbeat. I mean, there's, some of us inside the circle thought maybe he could be one of the most improved players throughout the season because he hasn't seen that level of 5 men on the floor, mostly older than him. And then on top of it, he's playing against really good coaches that game plan and scheme for him. So he really had to adapt to it and adjust to it. So we knew there were going to be some growing pains. I think you can kind of see the progress he's making and learning from those mistakes. As Coach Shire had said early on in the season, like, you don't have to tell Cooper twice. Like, when you're about to tell him something, like, he knows it. He's a very, very smart, mature player. And sometimes going through those lessons is really the only way. You can tell him what's about to happen, but until you experience it and you see what that feels like, you kind of learn really quick. And I think we've seen that. And I think we'll see him continue to improve as this goes. I know he had the monster game the other day, but just from an efficiency standpoint, because he's such a high IQ player, wants to win, and he's kind of gone through that. He's heard the negative comments through a couple of bad possessions that he's had in the Duke game, I mean the Kansas and Kentucky game. But I'm in his ear not that much. John has the reins. He's an incredible mentor and coach, and more so just from a remind him who he is standpoint and how he plays and what he means to this state, and to stay positive, and the highs aren't too high, the lows aren't too low, as we talk about it. And he's sitting in a great spot, and he's got the entire state of Maine behind him, rooting for him, and he needs to remember, what he's done for everybody on top of what he's done for himself. So, it's pretty special for all of us.
Coach, obviously Cooper has a very special future ahead of him, many, many years of basketball. You were one of the people that obviously got to see him before most other people. Is there a Cooper Flagg story that you will always tell as obviously his career progresses and progresses and progresses, but one that you're always going to be happy to pull out?
There's so many of them because he's saved us so many times. I would say a real quick Cooper Flagg story, which his mom Kelly's our assistant coach at Maine United, and we were playing in a Made Hoops tournament in DC, and it was like day 3. And back then, you're playing 2 or 3 games a day, and it's a lot. And if you've watched Maine United play, we have a pretty short bench. We kind of ride him as hard as we can. So he had like 103-degree fever going into the next day. And that night we're kind of like, what are we doing? We're playing some team out of DC, and this is kind of new for Maine United on this stage. And I remember him celebrating in the middle of the night because he broke his fever, and he was sweating through everything, and everybody was excited. And then, he felt better the next morning, but obviously, your body's going through a lot. And he showed up the next day. We played this team that brought in about 2 or 3 players from 2 age groups older just to try to beat us. And, Kelly and I looked at each other and said, we might be able to get this one with Coop, but we're going to have a trouble in the next game. And I think he did one of his Cooper things where he probably had a quadruple double with 40 points on, 16 for 18 from the floor. And we should have just let him coach that game as well, because he was going to will us to win. So just the effort that he puts on behalf of his teammates and his circle is always impressed us. And there's many stories like that, and he's willed us to win games where we're sitting on the bench being like, how do we do this? And he just figures it out and does it, and we're all seeing it nationally now. But we've seen instances of this, for the last 10 years. So it's been pretty special. And then to kind of share this with the world, and as they're seeing this happen for such a young college player is so exciting for all of us.
Yeah, that's what separates the Cooper Flaggs from me, because if I stub my toe, I don't get out of bed. So never mind.
He got a flu game.
He already got a flu game. No, that's great. Andy, we'll get you out here on this. I know you spent some time at Boston College, Duke up in Chestnut Hill, playing at 8 Eastern time on ESPN. How are you going to take in that game? I mean, you got rooting interest on both sides?
I do, but it's been a while since I've been back to Coney Forum. Obviously, I'm heading there tonight with half the state of Maine and a lot of friends. So clearly, I'm besides his close family, I'm the biggest Cooper Flagg fan that there is. So I will be having my Duke shirt on for sure.
Very good, Andy. Enjoy the game. We appreciate you coming on with us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
We got a great slate of games across the ESPN family of networks, starting with Alabama and Kentucky. Tide coming off that loss at home to Ole Miss. Number 1 team in the country, Auburn, heads to Athens. How about Georgia's schedule the last couple of days? They play Tennessee. Now they got the number 1 team in the country. This is a great slate. Again, Texas at Florida, Ole Miss, Mississippi State in an Egg Bowl kind of on the basketball court. Number 3 Duke goes up to Chestnut Hill as well. You're watching Countdown to Game Day, covered by State Farm. We are now joined by Andraya Carter, analyst of College Game Day. What's one game you're going to be glued to today, Dre?
One out of all of those great games. Well,
yeah.
you've got the two rivalries, Tennessee and Vanderbilt, and then Ole Miss, Mississippi State, those two. But the one I really want to watch is Alabama, Kentucky. Alabama coming off a loss. How did they respond on the road at Kentucky? Kentucky shoots well at home. Kentucky hasn't lost at home. So that one I'm going to have my eye on.
Dalen?
First of all, Dre looks amazing.
Yes.
I feel like a hobo right now.
Well, you all get to be comfortable.
You're fit nicely with State Farm and the motif.
Want to trade fits? You want?
I would love to see how that works out. Game I want to see. I'm about to be Mr. Negative over here.
Yeah.
Arkansas, Missouri. Missouri coming off a great win against Florida. Okay. It really is about Arkansas and Cal. They're 0-4 in the SEC. They could be 0-5 on the road here. They do not look good. They do not look connected. do they have anything left? Do they have a bounce-back performance? Because they need to actually turn this thing around in earnest to find themselves playing into March. And right now, they're on the outside looking in.
I'm going to stick with the SEC, too. I'm looking at Auburn, Georgia. Usually this is a matchup that we see in football. And it's like, yes, I want to be there.
That's right.
I did not think I could be this excited for this matchup in a basketball game.
Yeah.
They look great. Ace Newell obviously playing really well. Georgia got a home win against Kentucky last week. Yeah. If they're able to get another one against Auburn, I think I start taking the Bulldogs a little bit more seriously. And I think in the SEC, when you get these home games, you got to make those count, man, because going on the road anywhere right now looks like a very daunting task.
I like the Ole Miss Mississippi State game. I think it's fascinating. Chris Beard's Ole Miss team, reminiscent of those Texas Tech teams. They force turnovers and then they score off of those. Mississippi State kind of in a little bit of no man's land right now, losing 2 straight. All right, Dre, I'll give you the floor here. Thoughts on the first half of the season so far? There's been so many great storylines, some disappointments, some excitements. Obviously, the Cooper Flagg story is taking over the whole entire sports world. But your overall thoughts on the first half of the season?
Well, I think it's been great. I think we've got a lot of freshmen that have really impressed me. Like, I know last year I was at the draft and it was flooded by international players.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this year's draft, there are going to be a lot of guys that are one and done because of the way that they're playing. Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, obviously Cooper Flagg. But there are other freshmen across the country that have really stepped up and led their team. Kasper's Yakuchonis, are any of you in on him or high on him?
All my chips on the table. All my chips on the table.
I'm telling you. So, one, watching the freshmen in this freshman class has got me excited. And 2, just the wealth of talent. Obviously, the SEC has been phenomenal, but the Big Ten, I thought, has looked really good as far as just competitive spirit and competing with each other. So, I've liked what I've seen so far.
All right, to not be too negative, again, give me a positive surprise and then your biggest disappointment.
Ooh, okay. Positive surprise. I would say Kentucky's been a positive surprise for me. I know they've dropped a couple of games. I know we talk about the loss to Georgia, and I understand that, and maybe not showing as much physicality in that game. But to me, the way Mark Pope has gotten that group to buy in and all of those pieces, and they've got the shooting and they've got the size on the inside, and they seem to buy in defensively when their offense isn't working. Like watching that Florida game when they got down and then they turned up their defense to get back into the game. I'm like, oh, we haven't seen that from Kentucky. And I know Kentucky fans in Lexington have been excited about that group, and that's a basketball town. So to see them get more excited about their team, I think has been good.
Give me a negative. Who's the disappointment?
Disappointment. I've been disappointed in Kansas. I just thought they were going to, when you talk about Arkansas looking disjointed, I think Kansas has looked disjointed. They've looked like a team where they have pieces, but the pieces don't fit
well
together.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Do you play through Hunter Dickinson, or are you a team that shoots threes off the dribble, or are you a connected team on the defensive end? To me, they're not fitting well together, and they don't know how they're supposed to win games or get back in games.
Now, who's a team that's not currently in the national championship conversation that you think could be by the time March comes around?
Like the pieces are going to continue to. Would you consider? Are people talking? And I don't know if people are talking enough about Houston. Maybe they are. Maybe they are.
That's good.
I don't think so.
I don't
all.
think people are talking enough about Houston. I feel like people have been more bought in on Houston in the past than they have been on Houston this season. They're leading the nation in field goal percentage defense. They're second in the nation in three-point shooting on their end. Like, that's something that we haven't seen from Houston. What's Houston's trouble? It's been offensive output at times in seasons past. They can't put enough points on the board. Now they've got a defense that's not as strong as Houston's defense in the past, but it's still a Houston defense. But they have the offense to go with it. So I think Houston is a team that could be. I have them in my Final Four. I was the only one on the game day crew, but I did have them in my Final Four.
Well, okay, I like that. That's interesting. SEC, they're the best league in the country. And I think it's by leaps and bounds. So with that said, who's the best team in that league, though? Because obviously Auburn is going through issues with Janai Broom. Are you going to go against your Vols? Game Day is going to be there next week. You're going to be there, Auburn, Tennessee. Who's the best team in the SEC right now?
We're going to talk about this on the show too, really with the best team in the country, comparing a few different teams from different leagues. But to me, it is still Auburn, because when you look at Auburn, you have a wealth of talent and productivity. Now, Tennessee is great, and I think the way Zakai Ziegler is playing and then stepping up and taking a load off of Chaz Lanier is extremely important. But to me, Auburn, you have guys that come in off the bench, and they don't just buy time until the starters get back in. They come in off the bench to produce at a high level. Cheney Johnson, Tahad Pettiford. You have a team that can withstand someone having an off night or game slippage or foul trouble. They play hard on the defensive end. They've got a wealth of talent on the offensive end. To me, it is still Auburn at the top.
And, when we pulled up the slate of games, there's a lot of numbers next to those names of those SEC schools. Dalen and I were talking about, hey, I remember back in the day, this used to be ACC's thing. Like, is the SEC a basketball school now, if you will?
It is. Can it be a basketball and football? Like,
Well, apparently
can it be a basketball and
Or
football
is
league?
football going the wrong way?
Football,
Are we
I
going
don't
to have
know.
that conversation? Look at Sam.
I
Here
don't
we
know.
go.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the SEC really has bought into basketball. Like, they have been known for football, but Jay Billis talked about it. I don't know, when was it? I don't know when he talked about it, but he talked about.
He talks a lot.
He talked about, though, the SEC really buying into being more dominant in the basketball space in like 2016, like committing to
Mike's
basketball.
Live, the former commissioner, made them invest resources, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Coaches.
So those type of things, and we're seeing the benefit of that. I also think we're seeing the benefit of them being such a dominant football league. We're seeing the benefit of those schools getting some of the dollar amounts and getting some of the resources and getting some of the facilities from their football programs and because of their football programs. So the two things go hand in hand.
We talked about the investment in coaching as well. Like the level of coaching in that league is bar none. All right, so College Game Day, like you said, Dalen, goes back out on the road next week, which means, Dre, we'll be back with the crew. And it also means the return of 94 Feet with Jay Billis, which is one of my favorite segments on that show. So if you would indulge us, Dre, we'll do a little 94 Feet of our own, get you back to the College Game Day desk here. And we'll do a little walk and talk. We'll pepper you with some questions. But I'm going to throw one at these guys. Guys, you got any questions for Dre? Lyles, questions for Dre while we do this? Because I got some. You guys got any? While we're doing this walk and talk?
Who's the best dressed guy on game day?
That's a good one.
Oh, best dress? Jay Will. It's Jay Will.
Jay Will?
Yeah,
all right.
Jay Will's fly.
One campus you want to visit this year?
Oh, one campus I want to visit this year. Oh, Houston.
Please.
I was just talking about Houston. I want to go to
Houston,
Houston.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
One snack that has to be in the production office for you.
Well, I'm not doing processed foods right now, but if I was eating processed foods,
missing out,
it would
Dre.
be Gushers because I'm a big Gushers girl.
Gushers, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Biggest diva on this set?
Biggest diva on this set right here. Oh, Seth, he's such a diva. He needs his hair done.
I know,
he needs
right?
his makeup. He's just the biggest diva possible.
A lot of good hair on this set. All right, one or two things that Andraya Carter needs to have when she travels.
I have to have my jump rope because I use it for my workouts. I also have to have probably my hair gel. Jump rope, hair gel.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
necessary.
the Yukon Huskies will three-peat as national champions. It's not so much a question. It's just more me speaking it into fruition because I'm a Yukon fan. So.
Okay. You okay this season?
No, I'm not doing good.
Got it.
Big game today against Creighton. All right, Dre, really thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll let you get back to work.
Appreciate it, of course. Thank you.
Seth chiming in here in the background.
This is Seth's ponytail,
I know.
actually.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching Countdown to Game Day, covered by State Farm.